The sunlight filtered through the kitchen window as Sarah moved carefully, her joints aching from a restless night. She set a steaming cup of coffee in front of Daniel, who was engrossed in his phone, scrolling through emails. "I'll go to the market today," Sarah began, her voice soft. "I also need to sort the pantry, and I'll start dinner early for your meeting." Daniel barely glanced up, murmuring, sounds like a lot of relaxing." Sarah paused, the sting of his words cutting deeper than she cared to admit. Daniel's comment wasn't new, in fact, it had become a familiar refrain in their conversations. Once an attentive and encouraging partner, Daniel had grown increasingly dismissive of Sarah's efforts, especially since she stopped working outside the home. While Sarah understood his stress as a corporate executive, she couldn't ignore the growing sense of inadequacy his words fostered. As Daniel finished his coffee and grabbed his briefcase, he added with a smirk, "Try not to overwork yourself." The comment lingered in the air long after the door closed behind him. Alone in the quiet house, Sarah sat down at the kitchen table, her hands trembling. She stared at her reflection in the polished surface, her pale face and weary eyes staring back. "He doesn't see me," she thought. It wasn't just the housework, it was the weight of everything she endured silently. That evening, the house was a whirlwind of activity as Sarah prepared for Daniel's dinner party. The guests were his colleagues, high-level executives with polished manners and sharp tongues. Sarah had spent the day cleaning, shopping, and cooking, a Herculean effort given her worsening fatigue. By the time the guests arrived, she could feel the dull ache in her legs creeping up her back. As the group gathered around the dining table, one of Daniel's colleagues turned to Sarah. "You've really outdone yourself," he said, raising his glass. Before Sarah could respond, Daniel chuckled and interjected, "Well, she has plenty of time to perfect everything. No 9-to-5 grind for her." The table erupted in laughter, but Sarah's smile froze. Her cheeks burned with humiliation, yet she kept quiet, unwilling to ruin the evening. After the guests had left, Sarah confronted Daniel while stacking the dishes. "Why do you always belittle me like that?" she asked, her voice trembling. Daniel waved her off, loosening his tie. "Come on, Sarah. It's just a joke. Don't be so sensitive." But to Sarah, it wasn't a joke, it was a pattern. One that made her feel smaller and more invisible with every passing day. The next morning, Sarah woke with a heaviness she couldn't shake. Her body ached in ways Daniel couldn't imagine, but the deeper ache was emotional. She stood in front of the bathroom mirror, studying her reflection. The vibrant woman she once was had been replaced by someone she barely recognized, a woman overshadowed by her husband's indifference. Later that day, Sarah attempted to confide in Lisa, her best friend. "He doesn't understand what I'm going through," Sarah admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Lisa listened patiently, her brow furrowed in concern. "You have to tell him, Sarah. He's not a mind reader. And honestly, he needs to hear it from you, not from his own assumptions." That evening, Sarah tried to approach Daniel, but he was glued to his laptop. "Can we talk?" she ventured cautiously. "Not now, Sarah," Daniel replied, his eyes fixed on the screen. "I'm swamped." Deflated, Sarah nodded and retreated to their bedroom. She sat on the edge of the bed, gripping a medical brochure she had been hiding. The words blurred as tears filled her eyes. She knew she couldn't keep living like this, but she didn't know how to bridge the chasm between them. The following week, the cracks in their relationship became harder to ignore. Daniel noticed that Sarah no longer greeted him at the door or asked about his day. Her silence was unsettling, but he chalked it up to moodiness. He didn't have the bandwidth to dig deeper. "She'll snap out of it," he told himself, dismissing the gnawing feeling that something was deeply wrong. One evening, Daniel came home to find Sarah asleep on the couch, surrounded by unopened mail and folded laundry. He felt a flicker of irritation. "Couldn't she at least finish the laundry?" he muttered, heading to the kitchen. As he reheated leftovers, he spotted a bottle of painkillers and a stack of medical brochures on the counter. He frowned, puzzled. Picking up one of the pamphlets, he scanned the title, "Living with Chronic Fatigue Syndrome." The next morning, Daniel brought up the pamphlet over breakfast. "What's all this about chronic fatigue?" he asked, his tone casual but curious. Sarah hesitated, her hands trembling as she placed a cup of tea in front of him. "I've been dealing with this for a while," she admitted softly. "I didn't want to burden you, so I tried to handle it on my own." Daniel leaned back, a flicker of confusion crossing his face. "So, you're saying you're sick? But you don't look sick." Sarah's heart sank at his words, but she pressed on. "It's not something you can see, Daniel. But it's real. The pain, the exhaustion, it's constant. And I've been pushing myself every day to make sure you don't have to worry about it." Daniel stared at her, uncharacteristically silent. For the first time, he began to question the assumptions he had built about Sarah's life. She wasn't lazy. She wasn't resting all day. She was fighting a battle he hadn't even noticed. But what unsettled him most was the realization that he had been part of the reason she felt so alone in her fight. A month later, Sarah and Daniel attended a networking gala hosted by his company. Sarah had spent hours preparing, despite the fatigue that threatened to overwhelm her. She chose an elegant navy dress and carefully applied her makeup, masking the exhaustion etched into her face. She was determined to be the supportive wife Daniel expected, even if it took everything she had. As the evening wore on, Sarah found herself standing quietly by the hors d'oeuvres table, listening to conversations she couldn't muster the energy to join. A colleague's wife approached her, offering a polite smile. "You're so lucky," the woman said, her tone friendly but condescending. "Staying at home must be such a luxury. I bet you have all the time in the world to pamper yourself." Sarah was about to respond when Daniel walked over, laughing. "Oh, she's got it easy," he said. "No stress, no deadlines, just a lot of relaxing." The comment hung in the air, followed by polite laughter. Sarah's face burned with humiliation, but she swallowed her frustration, unwilling to cause a scene. Later, as they drove home, Daniel noticed her silence. "You seemed a little off tonight," he said casually. Sarah stared out the window, her voice steady but cold. "You humiliated me in front of everyone." Daniel blinked, caught off guard. "Oh, come on, Sarah. It was a joke." She didn't respond, but the distance between them felt wider than ever. The following day, Sarah invited Lisa over for tea, needing a confidant. Sitting at the kitchen table, she recounted the events of the previous night. "It's like he doesn't even see me," Sarah said, her voice trembling. "To him, I'm just there. A convenience." Lisa frowned, her expression a mix of empathy and frustration. "Sarah, you can't keep letting this happen. He needs to know how much he's hurting you." "I've tried," Sarah replied, tears welling in her eyes. "But he doesn't listen. He thinks I'm overreacting." Lisa reached across the table, taking Sarah's hand. "You deserve better. If he won't see it, you need to make him see it. And if he still doesn't, maybe it's time to think about what's best for you. The thought lingered long after Lisa left, planting a seed of resolve in Sarah's mind. That evening, a thunderstorm rolled in as Daniel returned home, drenched from the rain. He tossed his wet coat onto the couch, grumbling about a long day. Everything that could go wrong did, he muttered, heading to the kitchen. Sarah stood by the sink, her hands submerged in soapy water. "Daniel, we need to talk," she said, her voice steady but firm. "Not now, Sarah," he replied, opening the fridge. "I've had enough for one day." Something inside Sarah snapped. She turned off the faucet and faced him, her eyes blazing. "Enough for one day? What about the years I've spent being dismissed, belittled, and ignored? What about the days I've pushed myself past my limits just to keep this house running while you act like I'm doing nothing?" Daniel stared at her, stunned. She had never spoken to him like this before. "What are you talking about?" he asked, his tone defensive. Sarah shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. "You don't see me, Daniel. And I'm starting to think you never will." Without waiting for his response, she turned and walked out of the room, leaving him alone with the storm raging outside. Sarah sat in the bedroom, staring at the rain streaking down the window. The argument replayed in her mind, each word heavy with the weight of years of unspoken pain. She thought about Lisa's advice, about what it would mean to leave. The idea terrified her, but so did the thought of continuing to live in a marriage where she felt invisible. In the living room, Daniel sat on the couch, his mind racing. He thought back to Sarah's words, each one hitting him like a blow. He had always prided himself on being a good husband, a provider. But had he been blind to her needs? As the storm outside began to subside, Daniel made a silent decision. He needed to understand what he had missed and how to fix it before it was too late. The next morning, Sarah woke up to the sound of Daniel moving around the house. She found him in the kitchen, flipping through the brochures she had left out weeks ago. "You never told me how serious this was," he said, his voice quiet but filled with something she hadn't heard in a long time, genuine concern. "I tried," Sarah replied, her tone weary. "But you weren't listening." Daniel nodded, his gaze fixed on the pamphlet in his hands. "You're right," he admitted. "I wasn't listening. But I want to now. I want to understand." Sarah watched him, her guard still up. She had heard words of regret before, but this time, there was something different in his eyes, something that gave her a glimmer of hope. The following weekend, Sarah and Daniel attended a charity luncheon hosted by his company. Sarah spent hours preparing, choosing a dress that flattered her figure and carefully applying her makeup to mask the exhaustion she felt. Though she was nervous about attending another event, she resolved to keep her composure, no matter what. As the luncheon progressed, one of Daniel's senior colleagues, Mr. Blake, turned to Sarah with a smile. "You must be the reason Daniel can focus so much on work. Keeping things running smoothly at home is no small task." Sarah was about to thank him when Daniel interjected with a laugh. "Oh, she's got it easy. No deadlines, no clients, just yoga and naps." The room erupted in polite laughter, but Sarah's face flushed with humiliation. She excused herself, retreating to the restroom where she leaned against the sink, staring at her reflection. Her chest tightened, and for a moment, she couldn't catch her breath. As tears blurred her vision, she made a decision: she would not allow this to continue. That evening, when Daniel tried to dismiss her feelings again, Sarah said with finality, "If this is how you see me, then maybe we shouldn't be together." The next morning was eerily quiet. Sarah hadn't slept much, her mind replaying the conversation from the night before. Daniel left for work without his usual parting words, though he hesitated briefly at the door. Sarah sat at the kitchen table, staring at the stack of medical brochures and the folder she had assembled weeks ago. This time, she wouldn't wait for him to notice, she would make him see her. When Daniel returned that evening, Sarah was ready. She handed him the folder, her expression calm but resolute. "I've tried to explain this to you before, but I need you to really listen this time," she said. Daniel looked at her warily but opened the folder, flipping through the pages. As he read about her condition, the symptoms, and the emotional toll it took, his expression shifted from confusion to guilt. "Why didn't you tell me it was this bad?" he asked softly. "I did," Sarah replied. "You just weren't paying attention." Over dinner, Sarah laid everything out. She spoke about the pain she experienced daily, the energy it took to manage the house, and the humiliation she felt every time Daniel dismissed her in public. "I've spent years trying to protect your image of me as the perfect wife," she said, her voice steady but heavy with emotion. "But I can't keep living like this. If you can't respect me, then we don't have a marriage anymore." Daniel put down his fork, his face pale. "Sarah, I didn't realize," he trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. "That's the problem, Daniel," Sarah interrupted. "You didn't realize because you didn't care to look. I need more than apologies. I need you to change, or I'm walking away." Her words hit Daniel like a blow. For the first time, he saw the depth of her pain and the very real possibility of losing her. "I don't want to lose you," he said finally. "But I know words aren't enough. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right." The following day, Daniel called in sick to work, a first for him. He spent the morning revisiting the folder Sarah had given him, taking notes and looking up additional resources online. The more he learned, the more ashamed he felt about how he had treated her. He realized that his comments, which he had dismissed as jokes, had deeply hurt the woman he loved. That evening, Daniel approached Sarah in the living room. "I've spent the day reading and trying to understand what you're going through," he began, his voice heavy with emotion. "I've been selfish and blind, and I'm so sorry. I want to do better, for you, for us." Sarah listened, her arms crossed. "I appreciate the effort, Daniel, but this isn't about one good day. I need to see consistent change." Daniel nodded, understanding the weight of her words. "I know I've let you down, but I'm going to prove to you that I can be the partner you deserve," he said. Sarah didn't respond immediately, but for the first time in years, she felt a glimmer of hope. Over the next week, Daniel made an effort to step into Sarah's world. He joined her on a trip to the grocery store, taking over the heavy lifting without being asked. He cleaned the house while she rested, something he hadn't done since their earliest years of marriage. He even accompanied her to a doctor's appointment, sitting quietly as the physician explained the challenges of managing her condition. During the appointment, the doctor turned to Daniel. "It's rare to see a spouse so involved," she said. "Sarah's lucky to have someone willing to learn and support her." Daniel felt a pang of guilt but also determination. "I wasn't always like this," he admitted. "But I want to be better." On the drive home, Sarah glanced at him, her expression softening. "I've noticed the effort," she said quietly. "Thank you." Though her words were cautious, Daniel felt a flicker of hope that their relationship could heal. Over the next several days, Daniel began observing Sarah in ways he hadn't before. He noticed the subtle winces when she stood up too quickly, the way her hands trembled as she folded laundry, and the exhaustion etched into her features by mid-afternoon. He realized how much he had overlooked, how much effort Sarah put into masking her pain just to keep their household running. One evening, Daniel found himself sitting alone in his office, flipping through his phone. He stumbled upon a video of a support group meeting for caregivers of people with chronic illnesses. The stories shared by the participants mirrored Sarah's struggles, and the guilt hit Daniel like a tidal wave. For years, he had dismissed her struggles as minor inconveniences, but now he saw the truth. He had failed her, not just as a husband, but as a partner. With determination, he vowed to be better, starting now. That night, Daniel retrieved a dusty box of photo albums from the top of their closet. He flipped through pictures of their early years together, Sarah laughing in the sun during their honeymoon, holding up a spatula triumphantly in their first apartment, and beaming at him during their anniversary dinner a few years ago. She looked radiant, confident, and full of life. Daniel lingered on a photo from their first year of marriage. Sarah was looking at him with an expression of pure adoration, while he grinned back at her. He couldn't reconcile the woman in these photos with the one he had hurt. She had given so much to their marriage, and he had taken her efforts for granted. As he set the album down, Daniel felt a surge of resolve. He couldn't change the past, but he could fight to rebuild the love they had once shared. The next morning, Daniel handed Sarah a handwritten letter. She eyed him cautiously before unfolding the pages. As she read, Daniel watched her expression shift from guarded to deeply moved. In the letter, he apologized for every hurtful word, every moment he had dismissed her pain, and for failing to see her strength. He acknowledged his ignorance and detailed the steps he planned to take to support her moving forward. By the time she finished reading, tears streamed down Sarah's cheeks. "I don't know if I can forgive you completely yet," she admitted, her voice trembling. "But this is a start." Daniel nodded, his voice thick with emotion. "I'll keep earning your forgiveness," he promised. For the first time, Sarah saw genuine remorse and commitment in his eyes, and though her guard remained up, she allowed herself a small glimmer of hope. Daniel's actions began to align with his words. He woke up early each morning to prepare Sarah's tea, giving her extra time to rest. He insisted on handling the grocery shopping and cleaning, tasks he had once dismissed as easy but now realized were draining for her. One day, he surprised Sarah by booking a session with a physical therapist, hoping it would help alleviate her pain. At first, Sarah was hesitant to trust his efforts, worried they might be temporary. But Daniel remained consistent, showing up for her in ways he never had before. He listened intently when she talked about her condition, and when she had a particularly bad day, he sat by her side, holding her hand without offering empty platitudes. Slowly, Sarah began to let her guard down, realizing that Daniel's commitment was genuine. Daniel made it a point to show Sarah his appreciation in small but meaningful ways. One day, he brought home a book by an author she loved, saying, "I thought this might lift your spirits." On another day, he ordered her favorite meal from a local restaurant, arranging a quiet dinner at home. These gestures, though simple, spoke volumes about his growing awareness of her needs. One afternoon, Sarah was sitting in the living room, feeling the familiar ache in her limbs after a long day. Daniel walked in with a warm blanket and wrapped it around her shoulders. "You've done enough today," he said gently. "Let me take care of the rest." Sarah looked at him, her heart softening. Though there was still a long way to go, for the first time in years, she felt seen and valued by her husband. After weeks of seeing Daniel's genuine efforts, Sarah decided it was time to share her struggles with her extended family. For years, she had hidden her condition, fearing judgment or pity, but with Daniel by her side, she felt strong enough to open up. One Sunday afternoon, her parents and siblings gathered in their home for a casual lunch, unaware of the weighty conversation that awaited. As they finished their meal, Sarah cleared her throat, her hands trembling slightly. "There's something I need to tell you all," she began, glancing at Daniel, who nodded encouragingly. She explained her chronic fatigue syndrome and fibromyalgia, detailing how the conditions had affected her life. Her voice wavered as she recounted the challenges of living with an invisible illness and how Daniel's initial indifference had compounded her struggle. To her relief, her family responded with compassion. "Why didn't you tell us sooner?" her mother asked, tears in her eyes. "We could have helped." Daniel spoke up, his voice firm but humble. "That's on me. I wasn't there for her when she needed me most, but I'm doing everything I can to make it right." The conversation ended with hugs, promises of support, and a newfound sense of relief for Sarah. For the first time, she didn't feel alone in her battle. Later that week, Sarah met Lisa for coffee to share how her family had reacted. "They were so understanding," Sarah said, a small smile playing on her lips. "And Daniel, he's been incredible lately. I didn't think he was capable of this kind of change." Lisa raised an eyebrow, sipping her latte. "That's great, Sarah, but don't let your guard down too quickly. Consistency is key." "I know," Sarah admitted, her smile fading slightly. "But it feels different this time. He's really putting in the effort." Lisa leaned forward, her expression softening. "You've been through so much, Sarah. You deserve this, his support, his respect. Just make sure you keep standing up for yourself, no matter what." Lisa's words stayed with Sarah, reinforcing her resolve to maintain her newfound strength, even as she cautiously allowed herself to trust Daniel again. As the weeks turned into months, Sarah and Daniel found themselves reconnecting in ways they hadn't in years. They began taking evening walks together, enjoying the cool air and the quiet moments to talk without distractions. On one such walk, Daniel stopped abruptly, turning to Sarah. "I've been meaning to tell you something," he said, his voice steady. "I'm proud of you. For your strength, your resilience, and for not giving up on us." Sarah blinked, taken aback by his sincerity. "I didn't think you noticed," she said quietly. Daniel smiled, reaching for her hand. "I see you now, Sarah. I see everything I should have seen before." His words brought tears to her eyes, but this time, they weren't tears of pain. They were tears of hope, of gratitude, and of the love she thought they had lost. For the first time in years, Sarah felt the walls around her heart begin to crumble. Daniel's journey to understanding didn't stop with small gestures. He began educating himself more deeply about Sarah's condition, attending a caregiver support group and reading first-hand accounts of living with chronic illness. One evening, he showed Sarah an article he had found. "I didn't realize how much isolation people with chronic illnesses face," he said. "I'm sorry for making you feel like you had to go through it alone." Sarah nodded, her voice soft. "It means a lot that you're taking the time to learn. It's not just about me, it's about us, and how we move forward together." Daniel proposed creating a plan to help balance responsibilities, ensuring Sarah didn't overextend herself on bad days. They worked together, prioritizing her health while still maintaining the rhythm of their home. These moments of collaboration brought them closer, strengthening their bond with each new step. One morning, Sarah woke up feeling worse than usual. The fatigue weighed her down like a heavy blanket, and even sitting up felt like an impossible task. Daniel immediately noticed the difference. "Stay in bed," he said gently. "I'll take care of everything today." Sarah wanted to protest but didn't have the energy. Instead, she nodded, grateful for his understanding. Throughout the day, Daniel handled the household tasks with care, preparing meals, running errands, and tidying up the house. When Sarah finally emerged from the bedroom, Daniel had set up the living room with soft blankets, a tray of tea, and her favorite book. "You don't need to do anything today," he said with a smile. "Just rest." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes as she realized how far they had come. Daniel's actions spoke louder than any words, proving that his change wasn't temporary, it was genuine. As Sarah and Daniel settled into a healthier rhythm, Sarah found herself grappling with lingering resentment. Although Daniel's actions showed genuine change, the years of dismissal and humiliation had left scars that weren't easy to heal. One evening, while they were watching television together, Sarah turned to him and said, "I need to tell you something." Daniel muted the TV and looked at her, his expression attentive. "What's on your mind?" he asked. Sarah hesitated, then spoke. "I still feel angry sometimes, about how you treated me, about how invisible I felt for so long. Even though you're doing everything right now, those feelings don't just go away." Daniel's face softened, and he reached for her hand. "You have every right to feel that way," he said. "I know I can't undo the past, but I'll keep proving to you that I've changed, no matter how long it takes." Sarah nodded, her heart feeling lighter. It wasn't forgiveness yet, but it was a step closer. A year after Sarah and Daniel's pivotal confrontation, their relationship had transformed into a true partnership. To mark the anniversary, Daniel planned a quiet evening at home. He cooked Sarah's favorite meal and set the table with candles and fresh flowers. When Sarah entered the dining room, she paused, her eyes welling with tears. "What's all this for?" she asked. "For us," Daniel replied, pulling out a chair for her. "This year hasn't been easy, but I'm so grateful for the chance to be better, for you, for us." As they ate, they reflected on how far they had come. Sarah admitted, "I didn't think we'd make it, but I'm glad we did. It feels like we've found each other again." Daniel smiled, raising his glass. "To a future where we keep growing together." For the first time in years, they toasted not just to survival, but to a thriving love. One afternoon, Sarah approached Daniel with an idea. "I've been thinking," she began, "maybe we could share our story, what we've been through, what we've learned. It might help other people in similar situations." Daniel considered her suggestion, nodding thoughtfully. "A blog, maybe? Or a support group?" he offered. "Whatever feels right to you." They decided to start a blog, documenting their journey and offering insights for others dealing with chronic illness and relationship struggles. Sarah wrote heartfelt posts about her experiences, while Daniel contributed from the perspective of a partner learning to support someone he loved. The blog quickly gained a following, with readers expressing gratitude for their honesty and vulnerability. For Sarah, it was empowering to use her voice, and for Daniel, it was a way to continue showing his commitment to their partnership. At a family gathering, Daniel took an opportunity to acknowledge his mistakes in front of those who had supported Sarah. After dinner, he stood and tapped his glass, drawing everyone's attention. "I want to say something," he began, his voice steady but emotional. "Over the years, I made a lot of mistakes, hurting Sarah with my words, ignoring her struggles, and failing to be the husband she deserved." The room was silent as Daniel continued. But Sarah gave me a second chance, and I'm so thankful for that. She's the strongest person I know, and I'm proud to stand by her side." As he finished, Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Her family erupted in applause, and her father clapped Daniel on the back. It was a moment of closure for Sarah, a public recognition of the pain she had endured and the love that had grown from it. On a crisp autumn afternoon, surrounded by their closest friends and family, Sarah and Daniel renewed their vows. They chose a quiet outdoor ceremony, with golden leaves falling gently around them. As they stood hand in hand, Daniel spoke first. "Sarah, I vow to always see you, to always listen, and to never take you for granted again. You are my strength, my partner, and my greatest love." Sarah smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. "Daniel, I vow to trust you again, to let you in, and to keep fighting for us. Together, we've proven that love isn't just about the good times, it's about growing through the hardest moments and coming out stronger." As they exchanged rings, their guests cheered, but the moment belonged solely to them, a testament to their journey from pain to healing. Later, as they danced under the twilight sky, Sarah rested her head on Daniel's shoulder and whispered, "Thank you for not giving up." Daniel kissed her forehead. "Thank you for giving me the chance to make it right." For the first time in years, they felt a deep sense of peace, knowing their love had been rebuilt on a foundation of mutual respect, trust, and unwavering commitment.